Practical Anarchy, a guide to self-determination. Dickie Dread. And this is another one in the mini-series, part 7, I think. So this one is about the news. And personally, I stopped watching the news about, well, God knows, 10 years ago or so, something like that. And it was one of the best things I ever did for my own mental health. I don't miss it at all, and I don't feel I'm less informed. I've got less to talk about, etc. So I wrote this essay basically to sort of summarise the various points involved. So should we watch the news? People often ask me how I can possibly keep up with the world if I never watch the news. Short answer is that I don't try to keep up with the news cycle at all. I haven't watched mainstream television news for years, and I do not miss it. I haven't watched mainstream television at all for years, actually. That does not mean I'm uninformed, apathetic, or hiding from reality. It means I've made a decision about how reality is mediated to me, and what that mediation does to my head. This question, whether to watch the news or not, sounds trivial, but it cuts to the heart of how power, fear and attention are organised in modern societies. It also is a practical question, not just a philosophical one. The answer shapes mood, anxiety levels, political judgement and the sense of whether the world is survivable. So part 1. The problem with mainstream news and the truth. Mainstream news presents itself as a natural window onto reality. In practice, it appears to be a heavily edited narrative shaped by ownership, advertising, political access, and time pressure. This does not require journalists to be corrupt or malicious. Structural bias does most of the work on its own. As Herman and Chomsky argued decades ago, the range of acceptable debate is quietly narrowed long before stories reach the screen. News prioritises conflict, novelty and outrage because these hold attention. Slow violence, poverty, ecological collapse, administrative cruelty struggles to compete with explosions, elections and scandal. Even when reporting is factually accurate, framing matters. A protest becomes disruption, a strike becomes chaos, a police killing becomes an incident. These are not lies exactly, but they lean reality in particular directions. From an anarchist perspective, this matters because the state and capital depend on a population that feels anxious, dependent and confused. Practical anarchy returns to this point repeatedly. Control is rarely imposed only through force, is normalised through stories, habits and routines. The nightly news is one of those routines. Section 2. The mental health cost of constant updates. Is now a growing body of evidence suggesting that constant exposure to news, especially crisis-driven coverage, correlates with anxiety, stress and feelings of helplessness. This is not surprising. Watching events you cannot influence unfold in real time is a reliable way to produce dread without agency. During the COVID-19 pandemic, many people found themselves compulsively refreshing news feeds, even as their mental health deteriorated. More information did not produce more clarity. It often produced paralysis. Doom scrolling is not a personal failing, it is a predictive response to platforms designed to monetize attention and fear. From lived experience, stepping away from the news created a noticeable shift. I did not become ignorant overnight. I became calmer. My sense of proportion returned. When something genuinely significant happened, I still heard about it, usually through people rather than screens. The idea that one must watch the news constantly to be an informed citizen may be more ideological than factual. Section 3. Not watching is not the same as not knowing. One common objection is that disengaging from the news is a privilege or a form of denial. There is some truth here. Ignorance can be luxury, but there is a difference between refusing to know and refusing a particular delivery system. Not watching the news does not mean avoiding information. It means being selective about sources, timing and depth. Reading long-form journalism, books, court documents or research reports may offer more context than a 2-minute segment designed to hold attention between adverts. It also allows information to be processed rather than endured. Practical anarchy makes a similar argument about participation more broadly. Voting once every few years is presented as engagement, while everyday acts of mutual aid, learning and solidarity are treated as marginal. In the same way, passively consuming news is framed as civic duty, while active understanding is sidelined. Section 4. Where to find more reliable or impartial sources. No source is truly impartial, but some are more transparent about their limitations than others. Long-form investigative outlets, non-profit journalism organisations and international sources can help triangulate events. Reading across political and geographical boundaries often reveals how parochial national news can be. Academic journals, while slow, can ground debates in evidence rather than reaction. Public inquiries, legal judgments and statistical releases are dry but informative. Even social media can be useful when treated as raw material rather than truth, a place to see what people are experiencing, not what is necessarily happening. The key shift is from constant consumption to intentional engagement. Fewer sources, read less often, with more attention. This is not withdrawal, it's refusal of saturation. Part 5. What about real danger close to home? A fair, you can really think about this. In fact, I pretty much added this because of one of our participants on the website. With what's going on with Trump at the moment, they're genuinely worried about themselves and their neighbours. So, a fair challenge to all of this is a question people usually save until last. What if something genuinely dangerous is happening where you live? War, civil unrest, environmental hazards, public health emergencies. Surely that is exactly when you need the news. This concern is reasonable, but it may still overestimate the role mainstream news plays in keeping people safe. In practice, immediate risks at the level of country, region or town are rarely first encountered through rolling news. They are encountered through sirens, texts, neighbours, schools closing, transport stopping, or someone knocking on your door. When danger is real and proximate, it tends to announce itself. Local knowledge often travels faster and more accurately than national broadcasts. Community WhatsApp groups, local radio, council alerts, and informal networks of neighbours frequently provide clearer and more actionable information than distant studio commentary. During floods, storms or industrial accidents, it's usually people on the ground who know which roads are blocked, which rivers are rising and which buildings are safe. National news may arrive later, filtered through speculation and dramatic framing. There's also a distinction between awareness and preparedness. Watching the news does not meaningfully prepare most people for crises. Knowing that something might happen produces anxiety rather than capacity. Practical anarchy consistently stresses that resilience comes from relationships, skills and local organisation, not from constant updates. Knowing your neighbours, understanding your environment and having basic plans in place does more for safety than hours of televised concern. This does not mean ignoring official guidance when it matters. Emergency alerts, public health instructions and evacuation notices should be taken seriously. But these are not the same thing as consuming daily political theatre or crisis speculation. One can remain reachable without being immersed. In short, when danger is distant, the news exaggerates it. When danger is close, the news is often redundant. Trusting local signals and human networks may be less glamorous, but it appears to be more reliable and far less corrosive to the nervous system. Choosing what enters the mind. This is the conclusion. Whether to not watch the news or news is not a moral question with a universal answer. Some people need it for work, others find it grounding. But it's worth recognising that the default, constant exposure is not neutral. It serves particular interests and has predictable psychological effects. For me, not watching the news is an act of self-defence and clarity. It creates space to think, read and act without being perpetually wound up by events I cannot influence directly. That choice aligns closely with the broader argument of practical anarchy. Autonomy begins with reclaiming attention, time and judgment from systems that profit from their capture. You can stay informed without being saturated. You can care without being consumed, And sometimes the most radical thing you can do is turn the fucking thing off.